welcome to our next installment in our live culinary class. Today our theme is homemade goodies, and we are going to be making some homemade graham crackers and some homemade pickles. Two things that you can buy at the store but are super easy to make if you know how to make them. You can make them at home. I don't have my assistants with me today because they're busy doing their online school, as I'm sure a lot of kids are doing. But we're going to go ahead and put this video right on our Facebook page and keep it there, so if you're not able to do it live, you can come back and do it later. And you can find on our website, yummysprout.com, under online classes, you'll be able to find all of the information for our past online classes and the live ones coming up, including what you need, the ingredients and the tools that you need. So that'll give you a chance to sort of have everything that you need. And then we're just going to keep them on our Facebook page so that people can come and do them. I've even had some people say one of our first ones that people have done a couple times. So again, there's no limit on how many times you can do the classes. And it's just kind of a fun way that we can connect and cook together right now while we all kind of have to be in our own little homes, but we can still cook together and connect this way. So today we're making homemade graham crackers and homemade pickles. And the recipe sheet, you can find that. I posted that right on our Facebook page this morning, and you can print it out or you can look at it on the computer. And if you print it out, you can cut it apart and kind of make it into a little book that has the recipes. We usually hand these out at our classes, but this is a good way for you guys to help follow along, especially if you miss an amount that I say or something. I'll try to go slow and repeat it, is what we've been doing, and that's worked pretty well. But it's also good to have the recipes. So the recipe is right on our page. Also put it in the event, the recipe sheet, so that people can find it easily and follow along while they cook. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to actually start with our homemade graham cracker recipe, since that has to go in the oven. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my oven on to 375 degrees. So if you haven't done that yet, turn your oven on 375, okay? All right, so that's going to start preheating just while we make the graham cracker dough and sort of make the graham crackers. That's usually the right amount of time to get the oven all warmed up for us. So we're going to start by making our graham crackers. Now that we've gone ahead and warmed up our oven, we're going to start putting our dry ingredients into one of our bowls. So take one of your bowls, medium or large sort of size bowls. And if you have a sifter, we're going to sift our ingredients into this bowl. Also, if you don't have a sifter like this, you can use sort of like a sieve, a strainer, if it's the mesh kind, and just sift it like that. If you don't have a sifter, you can totally skip this step. That's very fine. It just kind of helps get that nice even blend and whisk of those dry ingredients. It kind of helps the texture basically of the graham crackers, but it's not critical. I've done it before where we've skipped the sifting step in a class, especially sometimes when you're doing in-person classes and we're all together. We might have to speed up at one part or slow down, and so that's kind of the nice thing about cooking at home, is that if you're watching this after the fact, you can pause the video or you can come back to it later too, so everybody can kind of work at their own pace. I'm going to try to go slow enough that everybody can keep up, and also not so slow that everyone's like falling asleep, but that everyone stays awake. So we're going to start by sifting our dry ingredients into the bowl. The first thing that we need is 2 1/4 cups flour. 2 1/4 cup flour. Now, you can use any type of flour. All-purpose flour works great. I'm going to be using some gluten-free flour today, but you can totally use whatever you have on hand. I have just received word this week that there is some flour shortages. Some people are struggling to get flour. So definitely in this time where we don't necessarily have all the exact ingredients that we want, we're trying to share recipes that are pretty flexible. So this is one that I've made with all different types of flour in different classes, and it always works, so knock on wood. So whatever type of flour you have on hand, you should be able to use that. And again, like when we're making the dough, if it seems a little too wet, you can always add more flour. So I'm going to go ahead and add 2 1/4 cups of my flour right into my sifter. So I've kind of already got mine measured out, but if you haven't measured yours, go ahead and measure your flour. I'm just going to kind of dump all the dry ingredients into my sifter and then sift it in. And then we're going to whisk them up too, so it's okay if they're not combined. All right, so that's 2, and then we need 1/4. All right, 2 1/4 cups flour. Any type of flour you have on hand will work. All-purpose works great. That's what we use a lot for our classes. I'm using gluten-free flour today, and that also works great. So you can use what you have on hand. And then next, we're going to add in 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. We really want to get that nice cinnamon taste into our graham crackers. So I'm going to go ahead and add that cinnamon right into the sifter. So 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon right on top of your flour. Now I'm going to add in 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So this one's 1/2 teaspoon, so I'm going to add 2 of these. See, we're doing math too. 2 halves equals 1 whole teaspoon. So we've got 1 teaspoon of baking soda in there as well. And then we're going to add in 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So these aren't going to be super salty crackers, but when you make graham crackers, you kind of get that salty, sweet taste. They're mostly going to be sweet though. And a lot of times when you're baking, you'll notice that it calls for salt. Adding a little salt can help bring out the sweetness too. All right, so now we have our salt, which was 1/2 teaspoon. We added 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and we added 1 whole teaspoon of baking soda right into our flour sifter. And that's all our dry ingredients, so we're just going to sift them into the bowl. So if you guys have one of those other sifters, the sieves, you can shake them in. This can take a while, so one thing that I do sometimes is I take a spoon and I kind of push it in there, and then it goes a little faster. So it's kind of like it's snowing, although I really hope that, I heard we were maybe going to get more snow here in Wisconsin, and I'm really hoping that that is false since it is April, but we'll have to see. It wouldn't be unheard of. It feels like it could happen, but we'll have homemade graham crackers, so it'll be okay. So I'm kind of sifting this in, and then you can kind of see I'm getting a really nice sort of soft mixture at the bottom. There we go. All right. So while you're sifting that, and if you're working with a sibling or with a grown-up, you guys can, one person can be sifting, and then one person can start working on our butter. We need to get our butter melted. So we need 1/2 cup of butter, and you can also use a butter substitute. I am using some Earth Balance today here, which is just like butter. And I'm going to go ahead and get that melting while we're doing our sifting. So 1/2 cup, I'm just going to melt it in the microwave. If you don't have a microwave, you can just melt it in a saucepan on the stove on low, and it'll still melt pretty quickly, even on the stove. All right, so while that's melting, I'll keep sifting my flour here, and you guys do the same. And again, you can always skip the sifting step if you don't have a sifter, but if you do, I would recommend sifting it. I used to have one of those old crank sifters, just like my grandma had, where you wound it like this. Oh, it was so much fun. But eventually it kind of got rusty and not great. But those ones are really fun to do because it's kind of like spinning a jack-in-the-box almost. All right, that sounds like it's melting. Ooh, there we go. Heard a little popping there, so that kind of told me. All right, so my butter's all melted. So I'm just going to set that aside for now because we'll need it really soon. I'm going to just dump the rest of the stuff that wasn't quite sifted all the way in, and we're going to whisk it up. It looks pretty good. Let me hit that a few more times. Make sure we got everything. All right, my dry mixture looks really good. You're going to want to take a whisk and then take your whisk and just kind of get your dry mixture all really well combined, because the sifting just kind of broke apart clumps. It didn't blend the cinnamon and the baking soda and the flour and the salt evenly. So that's what we're doing right now. And I would whisk it quite a bit. This is really the fun part. Whenever we teach classes, it feels like everybody loves the whisking, and I totally get that. Whisking is, it's fun, but also therapeutic too. Sometimes just whisking, you can kind of feel better. All right, that looks good. So I've kind of whisked that up. I'm gonna set my dry stuff aside just for a little bit and switch over to our wet ingredients. Then we're gonna combine them together and we'll have our graham cracker dough. So I'm grabbing another bowl. So grab another one of your bowls and we're gonna dump in that melted butter that we melted. If you haven't melted your butter yet, that's okay. You can go ahead and do that now. I want to get every last bit of that butter. All right, now into our butter we are going to add in some honey, and we need quite a bit of it. We're going to use half a cup, but that's pretty important to kind of make sure that all of our ingredients kind of stick together really well and our graham crackers are sweet. We're not adding any sugar, so we're kind of using the honey to sweeten our graham crackers. So I'm getting a half a cup. This might take a little bit because honey can come out kind of slow sometimes. That looks pretty good. All right, and if you happen to be low on honey, you could substitute part of the half a cup with some maple syrup for sure. That would definitely work. All right, and again, if maybe you had a third cup of honey, you could do, or a quarter cup, you could just reduce the honey a little bit and it would still be fine if you didn't quite have a half a cup. There we go. All right, so now that we have our honey and our butter in, next up we're gonna add in some vanilla as our last ingredient. So it comes together pretty quick and it really only has a few ingredients, which is great. So we're going to go ahead and add in a teaspoon of vanilla. We're going to just add some extra flavor into our graham crackers. So I've still got my half teaspoon here, so I'm going to do 2. So 2 halves equals 1 whole teaspoon. And then I'm going to use my whisk again because I want to whisk up this mixture. So go ahead and whisk up your wet mixture now. You're going to notice that that honey is going to quickly sort of melt and dissolve into the butter with that vanilla. So you just want to keep whisking until you have a really smooth, and it's going to feel a lot thinner than the honey did. Once that honey stops being so thick and gloppy, you'll kind of know you have it right. So you see this sort of liquidy-ish mixture. You just give it some good whisks. Whisk it up really, really well. This is the fun part. And if you like our rainbow whisks, we do sell these on our website as well, so feel free to check it out if you're interested in rainbow whisks, which we have. Well, these are both same size, small, but we also have large too. All right, so now comes the fun part. We're going to combine the two together. We're going to pour our wet stuff into our dry stuff, mix it up with our big spoon, and then our dough will be ready to turn into graham crackers. So really quick. So I'm just pouring the liquid into the dry, but you can do it the other way around. You can pour the dry into the liquid. I think I just kind of started this way, but really either way is fine. It might kind of depend on what bowls you're using too. Whatever seems the easiest, I would go with. I just make sure I scrape the bowl really well because I want all that buttery honey mixture into my flour mixture. All right, so now I'm going to start with the whisk, and then I'll probably switch over to the spoon once the dough starts coming together. So I'm going to tip it a little bit so everyone can kind of see. And once we have the dough mixed up, if it feels a little too liquidy to me, I might just add in some more flour. Again, especially if you're using different types of flours, sometimes you need to do that. It's looking pretty good though, actually, but well, that means that our oven is up to temperature. Whoop, there we go. All right. My dough looks pretty good. It's a little on the wet side, and I think that's because I used the gluten-free flour today. So a lot of times when I use the gluten-free flour, if that does happen, I'll add a little extra flour. I think I'll add a tiny bit more, not a lot. I'm going to add maybe a 1/4 cup more of the gluten-free flour. And it also depends on what type of gluten-free flour you're using, because sometimes different flours will affect it differently. And that'll be fine, because it's kind of a wet dough anyways. It's very kind of sticky, but you want to be able to kind of roll it and shape it into graham crackers. So you don't want it too liquidy. There we go. That's going to be just right. Let's show you guys what the dough kind of looks like here. Ooh, that looks great. Then I'm going to show you how we can turn it into graham crackers. That's kind of the fun part. Now, if you're making this recipe at home and you want to make like shaped graham crackers, you could totally use cookie cutters. I'm just going to show you how we usually do it, just to kind of make them look like regular graham crackers. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and roll it out sort of and show you guys how we do that. So, first thing I'm going to do is grab some parchment for the counter here, just so that I have a nice clean surface to work on, and that helps the dough not stick because it's kind of a sticky dough. And I'm going to put a little extra flour down too before I roll it out to help. So I'm putting down a little extra flour. There we go. And then I'm going to use my big spoon here and just kind of scoop my dough on. It's kind of sticky, so I am going to touch it with my hands, but I usually use the spoon to kind of get it out of the bowl. All that honey makes it nice and sticky. And I'm going to add a little extra flour over the top too, and a little extra flour onto my rolling pin as well. Just kind of helps it not stick. That was a lot of extra flour, but and then I'm going to kind of roll my dough out. I kind of just try to make it into a rectangle-ish shape. There we go. Mine smells really good too. I can really smell that cinnamon. So I'm wondering if you guys at home smells as good. I bet it does. Once I kind of have like a rectangle, then I'm ready to cut it out. And how thick you make it totally depends on you. It will puff up a little bit when it cooks, so you don't need it to be super, super thick, but you also don't want it to be like so flat that it kind of gets a little too crispy. You kind of want, it's kind of a softer graham cracker that comes out, not a hard, rock hard one. Now we're going to use a pizza cutter to cut it out. Now if you don't have a pizza cutter, you can totally use a knife. A plastic knife or a metal knife will work. These are our Kid Chef knives. We also sell these on our website, yummysprout.com, so if you're interested, you can find them online too in 3-packs, but we sell them just individually, so if you just needed one. So you could cut with the knife, or I'm going to use my pizza cutter because it saves me a lot of time. And I'm just going to kind of make a grid so I can get rectangle graham crackers. I'm not trying to make them really perfect because they're homemade, so they should look homemade. But if you're thinking you might use these graham crackers for s'mores, then you might want to get some that are the same size so you can match them up to make those s'more sandwiches. And these are really good with s'mores. I love them. Alrighty. So now I've got my grid pattern, and then you're also going to need a fork. So the fork kind of has 2 jobs. It can help you scoop up the graham cracker, and also you can poke little air holes. A lot of times when you buy the store-bought graham crackers, they have those little air holes, those little dots, so you can kind of give it that look. So I've got a parchment-lined pan here, so you're going to grab your parchment-lined pan for baking. Now, some people just transfer this parchment over. If you cook it like this, they're going to kind of stick back together. They're not going to be broken apart. So I usually try to move them from the one to the other. This one's kind of goopy. And then I'll just use my hands to kind of shape it into the shape if it gets messed up. There we go. I'll show you guys what this looks like. And then I take my fork here poke my little holes all the way down so you guys can kind of see. There we go. There's my graham cracker right there. So you guys can use your creativity and make your graham crackers look however you want them to look. They can be rectangles, they could be squares, you can cut them out of shapes, and definitely you can make dots on them. And most of you, depending on what flour you use, your dough is probably a little stiffer than mine. Mine's a little on the goopy side, so I'm going to kind of have to shape them a little bit as I squish them down. There we go. And again, you can cut them apart and just kind of move the whole thing to the pan, but you're going to want to separate them a little better just to make sure that you don't have them all sticking together. I think the pizza cutter is working really well for me now to kind of get them up. There we go. So just keep working on that, getting your graham crackers shaped. That might actually take you guys a little while. Usually when we're doing this in a class, that's the part that takes us the longest. Everyone has a lot of fun shaping and putting their little dots on their graham crackers and making them look unique in their own way. And that's one of the things that I love about cooking classes with kids and with grown-ups too, with everyone, is that everybody's recipe kind of comes out a little bit different and you get to put your own spin and your own creativity on it. And there's just something so amazing about creating something and then getting to eat it. That's like the best part. So I'm going to just add a few more to my pan before I get these in the oven. It's looking pretty good. I don't want them too close together because they'll spread a little. And so I don't want to end up with one giant graham cracker. Although that might be really yummy. You could use it like a pie crust. It might be really good. So I'm going to scoop up just a couple more here. And then I'll get mine in the oven. And you guys are probably getting to the point where yours are getting close to maybe. All right. I can really, really smell the cinnamon and the honey now. And I'm thinking that's going to increase too when I start baking them in the oven. This whole kitchen will smell so good that my little assistants who are working on school in their rooms, they're going to be like, what's that smell? They might wake their way down here. All right, I think I'm going to add one more from my dough here, and then the rest of my dough I'll wait and I'll cook later in the interest of time here. I probably could fit them all on one pan, but it would just take me a little extra time. So, all right, so I'm going to get some holes in these graham crackers and get it in the oven. I'm just kind of doing three little rows of holes here. There we go. You guys can do them however you like. I had somebody once in a class, they used a toothpick and they made their initial in their graham cracker. It was really cool, and I wasn't sure it would show up, but it did because they kind of made it nice and deep. So now that I've got my graham crackers all dotted and ready to go, I'm going to pop them in the oven, and then we'll start making our pickles. All right, graham crackers in the oven, and let me confirm my time on those. It says 6 to 8 minutes is what the recipe says, and that's pretty accurate. But again, everybody's oven is a little different, so I would check it after 5 minutes, and again, it could take up to 10 minutes or so. Also depends on what type of flour you're using. Since I'm using gluten-free flour, I bet this is going to take the maximum amount of time, possibly 10 to 12 minutes, so it just kind of depends. With these ones, you just kind of watch them, and you'll know when they're done because they'll get a little browner on the edges, and they'll kind of be firmer, and then you take them out, let them cool, Once they're a little bit cool, you'll be able to pick them up just like any other graham cracker. So they're going to be delicious. So I'm going to move this out of our way now, and I'll make the rest of my graham crackers later because I do not want to waste any of that yummy dough. And I'm thinking, I'm definitely thinking of the s'mores thing now. Now that I mentioned that, I'm like, ooh, tonight we could have s'mores. That would be so good. And the weather's still good here right now, so I'm like, oh, we could roast marshmallows. Yeah, so this is a good recipe to make kind of year-round, but it is fun in the summertime or the springtime. If you can turn it into s'mores, it's really fun. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to our pickles recipe. I'm just sort of clearing our space up a little bit. We got a lot of dough everywhere, so you might want to wipe down your surface a little. If you have a lot of graham cracker dough everywhere, you might want to do that. Let's see, we got our towel here. We'll kind of wipe that off. All right. So now our next recipe is homemade veggie pickles. And I love this recipe because I used to, when I was young, I always thought pickles were so complicated and hard and you always had to buy them in the store. It just seemed like a really difficult process. And you can pickles using a water bath canner or another method where they'll last for years. You can keep them in your basement. We're just going to make a quick pickle version that'll be ready in 24 hours and it keeps for about 1 to 2 weeks in the fridge. So it's a great recipe if you know you can eat them up in a couple weeks, which I usually do. And you can pickle almost any vegetable, which is great. So really, you guys can choose what veggies you want to use and also what you have on hand. Obviously, traditional pickles are made with cucumbers, so I'm going to be using some of those today. But I also have carrots and peppers and cherry tomatoes and what else do I have here? Oh, I think that might be it. Yeah. Oh, and celery. And I have some celery too, which if you've never had pickled celery, it's kind of weird, but it's also kind of good. So again, if you like pickles, and if you're making these recipes with me today and you do not like pickles, don't worry. But I bet you there's somebody in your house that might really like the pickles that you could make them for. So somebody that you care about if you're not so sure about them. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to prepare our veggies for the pickles. So if you haven't already, make sure you wash your vegetables really well. I've washed my celery and I've got my cucumbers here. And then I also have some carrots here, which I washed and I need to peel. And then I have some peppers, some little sweet peppers. You could do jalapenos, spicy ones if you like spicy stuff. That's really good pickled. And then we have some little cherry or grape-ish sized tomatoes, some little heirloom ones that are different colors. So my goal is to have a really pretty jar. So you're going to need a couple of jars, maybe one. If you only have one, you can just make one, that's fine. I'm going to try to do a big one and a small one here. I'm thinking I'm going to put just cucumbers in my small one and just make some traditional pickles, and then I'll put a whole bunch of stuff in my big one here. So first we'll get all our veggies ready, and then we'll mix up our brine that we're going to use that's going to kind of do its magic trick and turn these veggies into pickles. So I'm going to go ahead and open my jars so they are ready. And you want to make sure you're using a jar or a container with an airtight lid. So if you don't have a canning jar on hand, find something that you know the lid is airtight. Also, reused jars can work. So if you had like a peanut butter jar or a different jar that you washed and sanitized, you could use that to make your pickles. That would be great. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut up my cucumbers. And I'm going to use my Kid Chef knife because I want to show you how great these work on veggies. And they're just made of plastic, but they work really well. So whenever we're cutting, we want to make sure that we're extra safe with our tools, because even the most experienced chefs and those people in the fancy restaurants that chop crazy fast, they still have to use safety too, because it can be a little tricky and it doesn't feel good to cut yourself, that's for sure. So step one, make sure if you're not cutting that you just kind of leave your knife down, that you're not holding it and playing with it. Step two, and that's good advice for everyone, including adults. So step two, make sure you're holding the grippy part of your knife. Depending on the knife you have, they all usually have a gripping part with your dominant hand. So whatever hand you write with, that's usually your knife hand. Your other hand is going to be in a claw, or let's see, letter C. Anything that keeps your fingers tucked, basically, so you don't accidentally cut on them. And this is the way I cut all the time, whether I'm teaching or whether I'm at home. It's just a great way to make sure I'm not going to cut on my fingers. And so for these knives, they kind of work great as a saw. I'm just slicing my cucumbers because I think that'll be really good for pickles. But you could cut them the long way. So like you could cut one where you're going to get what I believe are called pickle spears. So you kind of cut them in quarters this way, and then you kind of have a spear shape. So maybe I'll do a few spears, and then I'll do my slices. And also, if you're not sure about the pickles, you might just want to wait. They'll be done tomorrow, because they'll be done in 24 hours, and try them and see what you think. Sometimes, I cannot even tell you how many times in all of the years that we've been teaching classes, kids and adults have thought they weren't going to like something, and then they tried it, and they were pleasantly surprised that they did. So that doesn't always happen, but if you try it, then you might be surprised, and you might really like it. So I'm going to get my celery ready next. I'm just kind of cutting off the ends. I'm going to kind of cut it into skinny strips for my pickles. I don't want it to be too much. And basically I'm getting all my veggies ready before I put them into the jar, and so we're going to do that step first. So now your tomatoes, you can totally leave them whole if you want. A lot of times we made these last summer at a camp, and a lot of the kids left them whole and they worked great, but you can also cut them in half. I think I'm going to cut in half the ones that are slightly bigger, but I'm going to leave the smaller ones whole. Oh, awesome. All right. And then for peppers, I usually, again, you can leave them whole, but I like to cut them into strips, and I usually cut out the seeds if they have seeds in them. So I pull them out. Here we go. I'm just going to kind of make skinny little pepper strips. There we go. Yep, that one definitely has some seeds. I definitely think jalapenos would be really tasty, but spicy for sure. So if you're not big on spice, maybe not. All right, there we go. Awesome. Okay, now my veggies are almost ready. Last step is I would like to do a little carrot. So since I have this carrot here that wasn't pre-peeled, I'm going to peel it just a little bit. Whenever you're peeling, you always want to make sure you're peeling kind of away from yourself. It's never a good idea to bring a sharp object towards yourself, but sort of peeling away from yourself is always a great idea. Okay, I really like the pickled carrots. They're really good. I'm going to go ahead and check on our graham crackers and see if they might be ready for us. Oh, they look so good. I definitely think my graham crackers are ready. And I had set my timer for 8 minutes, so that was the maximum time. I'm going to show you guys what they look like here. Oh, they look so good. And you can see they've puffed up a little bit, and just a little. They spread, but not too bad. Some of my more rounded ones look a little circle, but I think they're going to be really delicious. So I'm going to let them cool before I try to really move them or anything, because they'll still be really soft and hot in the middle. So they really need to cool before you try eating them. And definitely I can see the edges are brown around the edges, so I know that they're done. And I checked underneath, and they're totally done underneath. So perfect. All right. While those are cooling, we'll finish up our pickles. So my carrot. Carrot is one that is a little tricky to cut with these plastic knives, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. Just kind of saw down. Sometimes what happens in our classes, if we are cutting carrot with these plastic knives, is that it goes flying a little bit, so you do have to be a little careful. That can happen with any knife and carrots. All right, so I've got my carrots. I don't know if I'm gonna. I think I might slice them. I don't want them to be too big. I'm making them more like chunks than slices. But again, with the pickles, same thing goes. You guys can use your creativity and make your pickles look however you want and whatever size you want them to be. Okay, now it's time for kind of getting these pickles together. We've got our veggies all cut here, and I'm going to take a little bit of salt. I'm just going to put a little bit in my hand. You'll notice the recipe said plus extra. This is the extra. And I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of salt on my veggies. just to help get a little bit. There's also going to be salt in the brine. And then I like to rotate them. You can skip this and just do one side, but I like to kind of flip them over and then salt the other side as well. All right, now before we whip up the brine, we can go ahead and add our veggies into our jars. So remember I said I was going to add my cucumber slices into my small jar. And there we go. I got all my slices. And there's going to be space still in it because we've got a couple more things to add. So when you are filling up your jars, whatever size jar you have, make sure you don't fill it too full because we want to be able to fit everything. And then also, it might be pretty close to the top, but there'll be a lot of gaps and space in there. So when we pour that brine in, there'll be room for it, even if your ingredients are kind of coming close to the lid. All right, now I'm going to put my veggies in the big jar. I've got my celery and carrots and peppers all kind of going in. If I don't drop them here. And my tomatoes. I love making this one of the different veggies because it turns out so colorful. And this is a really great gift that you could give somebody too. You could, if you have even a neighbor or somebody, this is something you could make for somebody and leave on their porch or let them know you're going to give them that. It's a really pretty, colorful gift. I usually just always include, if I'm giving it as a gift, store in the refrigerator and then keeps for 1 to 2 weeks so that people don't think, oh, this will be good in 2 or 3 years, like a canned pickle. And again, you could always can these ones too if you have a way of water bath canning. But I kind of like to do the quick method. So there I've got all my veggies in their jars. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a few more ingredients into the jar, then we'll make our brine. I've got some peppercorns here. So if you don't have these, that's totally fine. You can make it without. I usually have these on hand because we use them for our brine when we make our Thanksgiving turkey. So it feels like we only use them a few times a year, but we usually have them on hand. So I'm just going to take a few peppercorns and put them into both of my jars. I'm only going to put like 3 or 4 into my little jar, but I'm going to put a little bit more in my big jar. So if you have peppercorns, go ahead and add those into your jar. And we also have some fresh herbs that we're going to add. Now, fresh herbs can be tricky to find, so if you don't have fresh herbs and you have dried ones, this is some dried dill. You can just add dried dill. I've also got some fresh dill, so I'm actually going to put in a little of both. And you don't have to use dill. You could use any herbs you have on hand. Thyme is really good in it, so is rosemary. So I'm just going to take some of my dill here. And you could chop it up, but I'm just going to kind of break it up and pour it in because you're not going to really eat the brine. Well, some people like to drink pickle brine. You're just going to eat the veggie part. So leaving it kind of whole is totally fine. You can put the whole sprig of whatever sort of herb you're using. All right. So now I've got our herbs in there, and we have some lime we're going to add in too. So I'm just going to put in about half a slice of lime in both. So small little piece of lime into both jars, one in each jar. And then also you can add garlic into each jar, a clove of garlic. And you don't have to crush it or dice it or anything, just peel the papery part off of it and stick the clove right in the jar. And if you're worried about it being too garlicky, you can cut it down a little smaller and put just a piece of that garlic clove in there. We do that sometimes. We're a little low on garlic at our house right now, so I'm going to skip the garlic for these. I don't want to run out of garlic for some of our other things that we have to make for dinners coming up. So I'm going to skip the garlic. It'll still be really delicious. But if I have extra garlic on hand, then I usually do add it. So if you guys have it, you can add it. And it's definitely one of those optional ingredients. All right, that is all of our stuff we need to add to our jar. So the only thing left to do is to make our brine, and then we're going to fill our jars, and they'll be totally ready. So I'm going to grab our other bowl, and we're going to go ahead and mix up our brine right in this bowl. So the first thing we need is a cup of apple cider vinegar, and you can use a different type of vinegar if you don't have apple cider vinegar. I love how these pickles turn out with apple cider vinegar, but you guys can completely make them with a different vinegar. Rice vinegar, white vinegar, I don't know how balsamic vinegar would work, but any sort of light colored vinegar would work for sure. So apple cider vinegar, and that was 1 cup, and then we're going to add 1 cup of water. So the ratio is kind of 1 to 1 on water to vinegar. So if you're making a larger batch, maybe you had more veggies and you had a lot more jars, you can double this recipe easy just by adding 2 cups of each thing and so on. So we've got 1 cup of water, 1 cup of apple cider vinegar in here, and then we're going to also add in some salt. We need, double check our amount, half a tablespoon of salt. And remember, we also added some salt to those veggies already, so we're going to add in half a tablespoon there right into our brine. And then I sort of like pickles that are a little sweet and a little salty, so I'm going to add a little honey. And you can see on the recipe sheet it calls for honey. If you want to omit that, they still turn out really yummy. You don't have to use the honey. It says 1/4 cup of honey, so I'm running a little low from our graham crackers, so I'm just going to add in, eyeball it, maybe about a couple tablespoons there. And if you don't like your pickles super sweet, you could add a lot less. And then I'm just going to whisk up our brine. And that honey dissolves really quickly in the vinegar. So once you kind of have it turned into a liquid and you think that salt and the honey are both dissolved into your liquid, then your brine will kind of be ready. And double check that I think that was everything. Yep. All right. There we go. And if you end up making this recipe and you make the exact measurements and you run out of brine, you can just quickly whip up another batch to fill all your pickle jars, depending on how much you're making. So I've got my little one here. I'm going to gently pour it. Now, sometimes what I like to do is use a measuring cup to kind of scoop it out. It's a little easier to pour it. So I just filled it up right to the top. It doesn't have to be totally at the top, but you want it to be covering all of the veggies. You don't want any of the veggies to be uncovered or they won't get pickled. So there we go. Got our awesome little jar of mini sliced little cucumber pickles, and then we've got our big jar of veggies, and I'm going to add the brine to that. Just to kind of get it to the top. Oh, it was just the right amount. Perfect. So now I've got my pickles here, and I'm going to put both of these in the fridge because there we go, I want them to brine and turn into pickles in the next 24 hours. And I think what I'll do is maybe we'll do a little mini video tomorrow, a little live to taste test these and show you how ours turned out. I would love, love, love to see pictures if anybody makes our recipes. Even if it's way after this live and you do it later, post in the comments, send it to us in a message, email it to us at hello@yummysprout.com. We would just love to see pictures of you guys, your families, making our recipes. It makes us so happy to be able to see that. So I'm going to go ahead and put these in the fridge, and then I'm going to test our graham cracker before we say goodbye and just make sure it is as delicious as I think it's going to be. All right, it's tough to pick which one, but I think I'm going to go with this one right here. It's very odd shaped. That is really good. Only thing that could make it better is if it was part of a s'more. So I feel like I might have to turn this into s'mores. Another thing that's really fun is jam. A lot of times we put jam on top of our graham crackers or scoop it in jam or peanut butter. So good. I love it. It's delicious. Well, I hope you guys had fun. I hope you were able to make our recipes. I want to hear how you liked them. I'd love to see pictures. We have more live classes coming up this month in April. You can find them all on our website. Just click on the tab that says online classes. We'll also have the information about past ones that we've done, so you'll have a chance to do them when you're able to. Let's see, what other news was I going to say? We have the knives and the whisks on our website in our shop for sale. If you're interested in those, ship out in 1 to 2 days. We also have gift cards for our future in-person classes. So feel free to check that out. And we have a couple ebooks that will be coming your way in the next couple of weeks too, with lots of great recipes. So thank you so much for cooking with me today. And I think it's time for me to go and let my assistants know that they can take a break from their schoolwork and come down and eat some graham crackers. Thank you so much for cooking with me today. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Have a yummy day.